Hey there, and welcome to Becoming More Me, the podcast for busy-minded entrepreneurs and professionals who want to be more and do less. I'm your host, Teresa Lear-Levine. I am an internationally best-selling author, an EFT master practitioner, a hypnotherapist, and most importantly, I would say I am someone who is doing this work of making the never-ending journey of becoming one that you really enjoy getting present for right alongside of you. And that brings me to the topic that we're going to be talking about today, because this has been a big part of my work lately. And when I say my work, I don't just mean the clients that I'm working with. I mean myself. Whenever I'm talking about a modality or making a suggestion, you can pretty much bet that it's part of what I'm doing for my own growth and development. And I'm always going to be somebody that's growing right alongside of you. I don't have it all figured out. I figure it out as I go, and that's all I can expect from those people who I work with and those who are in my community as well. So today, we're going to dive in to the language we use when we talk about ourselves, to ourselves, about the different situations that are going on. And there's so many levels of this. So this came into my consciousness recently as something I wanted to bring more to the forefront of my work, because I was spending a lot of time evaluating my own language. That's not new to me. As a hypnotherapist, as an EFT practitioner, I'm very regularly looking at the words that I'm using when I'm talking about my life, my business, my family, my kids, myself, my relationships, all of those things. And I'm actively looking for those sorts of things when I'm working with my clients too. The way that we talk to ourselves, both in our head and out loud, makes a huge difference. But this isn't so much about making sure that what you say is positive. Today, it's going to be more about our different words that we use when we're talking about ourselves, whether it's I or me or myself or you. And one of the reasons this came to the forefront for me recently was because I have been actively working on cutting filler words out when I speak. And for me, you may have even noticed this on recent podcasts versus older ones, I am speaking a little bit slower and bringing more of my own consciousness into what I'm saying, versus in previous podcasts, there were a lot more likes, you knows, and other filler words, and I would talk a lot faster and blah, 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 and that would get me saying those more. But it was also a less conscious way of thinking about what I was going to say. So I started to think about what we actually mean, or what we are telling our subconscious, especially when we say, you know. And then I cringed, thinking how much in the past, and even still now, I say, you know. Because there's usually a belief that is coming right after you say those words. So that's the kind of things we're going to be talking about. The structure of our language and the things that we are not even thinking about when we are discussing those things that we want to bring transformation to in our lives. It all starts now. All right, so I mentioned we're going to be talking about language today, and probably in a way that maybe you haven't even thought about it before, because so much of what we're going to talk about today is unconscious. But the cool thing when we talk about these things and when we start implementing different pattern interrupts in our life is that we never look at it the same way. Once you learn these things, once you put them into practice, then they're going to stick with you. And all of a sudden, you're going to be thinking about the way that you speak in a whole new way. And this is something I just love working on with my clients. So I just wanted to give you guys a little nugget of it today and see what it might plant the seed for in your own consciousness journey, because so much of the transformation, the change, the desired outcomes that we are working toward in our life are about elevating our consciousness. Our next level success lies in the changing of the way that we think. It lies in us understanding and integrating how to become a new, different, upgraded version of ourselves that thinks in a different way. So when we look at the heart of how we speak and talk to and about ourselves, we can learn so much. And I think that for other practitioners and coaches who are listening and who work with clients, this can be game changing for you as well. Because I know that before I started looking at this more several years ago in my practice, I often would confuse things that were going on in my clients with other things that were actually going on in my clients. So, for example, sometimes I would think that there was a phobia or a fear when actually there was extreme dislike or even hatred. So there can be confusion there. And sometimes it first only came to me, the recognition and the understanding of this, when I would watch back client sessions. Sometimes, there I did it, I believe that sometimes we get some of our greatest insights from replaying and rewatching client sessions. That's part of the reason why all of my client sessions are recorded. And since the majority of people I work with are on Zoom, I get to see both my face as I react to them as a practitioner and their face. So both sides are very telltale and very interesting when you watch something back that quite often was just happening too fast in the moment for you to pick up on it in session. So I started when I would have these cases that were just perplexing, and it felt like, why are we not making more progress? We're working on the right things, we're focused in the right areas, we're rewiring the subconscious mind in the ways that feel aligned, we're knocking out energetic blockages where it feels like they lie right down to the root. We're understanding things both on a conscious and a subconscious level, and we're taking action. All of the things were in place and in movement to create the desired change and transformation that the client came to me for. And yet, it either felt like it was going way slower than it should be, or that we just weren't getting the progress. So that to me, as an energetic detective, always feels like a challenge. Like, hey, Teresa, what are you missing? What's the outlier here? What's the difference? What are you going down the right path, or are you maybe barking up the wrong tree and need to look at this again? And that's usually when I will just grab a nice warm cup of tea or a nice icy cold seltzer water and sit back and just press play and watch it like I have never talked to the person before, never seen myself before, just make myself as much of a unbiased observer as is possible and start picking up on things that I just missed. And we all do it. So anyway, from a practitioner standpoint, this could be very helpful for you also, because sometimes we think something is one way and it's actually another way. And that's so true for life, isn't it? And we are the only ones putting any meaning to anything anyway. We are the meaning makers. So sometimes the meanings that we're making are not moving us down the road we want to go down. They're moving us in a different direction. So we can make a different meaning, have a different understanding, look at things a little bit differently, and then poof, it's crazy the things that can change. So that's just a little tip. But let's look at what the language looks like when we're talking about things. I'll start with some examples. So I had a client start working with me recently, and her main goals were taking her business to the next level and increasing her confidence and self-esteem while she did it. That's how she identified what she wanted to do and achieve in our time working together. And I'll say that when people come to me saying that they want to be more confident, there's always got to be a conversation around self-worth, because you can accomplish all of the things that require you to be more confident. You can make all of that happen. But if the internal identity, if the self-worth hasn't been dialed up alongside of that, it's not going to feel fulfilling, and you're not going to be able to keep up with it. And furthermore, you'll probably end up feeling like an imposter, and also have that feeling that it's not enough, that you need to do more, you need to create more success, more achievements, more accolades. So confidence always needs to be worked on right alongside self-worth. And I think that's an important thing to understand. Now, when we're talking about language, this client came into our first meeting, which was kind of a consult, I suppose. And here is what she said. I feel like no matter what I do, I just can't seem to get my business to the next level. And I get so frustrated with myself and tell myself it will be different. And I just don't feel like me when I'm frustrated and underperforming. But there's not a whole lot that seems to change that. Okay, so let's dissect that from the perspective of the language. And I think the first thing to pick up on is the difference between I and self. So if I reread the statement, I feel like no matter what I do, I just can't seem to get my business to the next level. And I get so frustrated with myself, self is different, and tell myself it will be different. Okay, so just looking at those, we have the I, and then we have the self. And the I is telling the self what it wants it to do and getting upset with the self because the self isn't doing it. So then the I is getting frustrated with the self. The I keeps talking to the self. And this is one of those things where we really need to normalize talking to ourselves more, because actually it's not that part that we need to normalize. What we need to normalize and upgrade is the listening to ourselves, because we spend a lot of time talking to ourselves and telling ourselves what we want, but we don't often listen to what the self is saying, because that's kind of perceived as being a little bit loopy, right? But it's what we need to do more of is to hear, what is the self saying when you're telling it to do something and it's not doing it? Because that is where so many of the answers that we think we are lacking are already within us. So this client might feel like she has a self-esteem issue, but if we look at this statement again, and she says, I just don't feel like me when I'm frustrated and underperforming. There's the I. The I doesn't feel like me when frustrated and underperforming. So it's actually more of a dislike for the self than it is a self-esteem issue, if that makes sense. And perhaps her exact statement is a little harder to follow on this than if she had just said, and I don't like myself. Or, we could even go deeper and say, I hate myself. And that would be an easier one to dissect and have this make sense, I think. So if she hates herself and then we do some work that allows her to give herself greater self-esteem, then she can actually just keep on going, hating herself without consequence to herself. And that's what people don't realize that they're asking for when they come looking for that self-esteem upgrade or that confidence upgrade, and say things like that they really dislike themselves, or they hate themselves, or they're so frustrated with themselves, that kind of thing. That it's not the self that is being frustrated with, hated, disliked, underperforming, whatever the case may be, it's the I that is projecting those feelings on the self. I know this is kind of deep and unusual, and that's really the point of it, because this is, again, about elevating consciousness. And of course, the self that is receiving the hate, dislike, frustration, criticism is also in need of some work, but we often miss the opportunity to start with the I that's creating the problem. Does that make sense? I'm just going to interject here before we go any further and invite you, if you're not already a member, to come join me over on the Becoming More Me community on Skool, which is spelled Skool, where I have an awesome, engaged community of like-minded ADHD entrepreneurs and professionals who are in the process, and we always will be, of becoming our next level selves, of getting more present in our life, of manifesting what we want for our lives, our businesses, our relationships, our spirituality, our health, all of the important areas of our life within this community. And I also offer free coaching over there. I have a classroom full of all of my most requested resources. And there are so many actionable things you can start doing immediately when you join and become a member, which again is totally free. So I invite you to join me and all of the other awesome people over in the Becoming More Me community by either using the direct link in the show notes or going to www.skool.com/discovery. On that page, you can type in my name, Teresa Lear Levine, and the Becoming More Me community will pop right up. Don't type in Becoming More Me. You'll never find the community for whatever reason. Just type in my name. The community will pop right up and you can request to join. And I cannot wait to welcome you over there and help you find those resources that are going to be most transformative and helpful for you on your journey. I'll see you there. All right, so let's go back to dissecting what this client said in a way that I hope you're able to look at the way that you talk about things and see the parallels. That's always what I'm hoping to do, is to give you things. I do this in all of like my video tapping rounds and stuff. I'm looking for you to find yourself in there, personalize it to you, and apply it to your life. I'm not just telling you stories and anecdotes because I think they're awesome. I'm telling you them because I do believe in the power and the law of one, and that what I'm talking about matters and applies to your life and the breakthroughs that you want to be making. So if we go back to the part where she says, and I just don't feel like me when I'm frustrated and underperforming. Me is another really interesting part of our language. And what I've learned about me is that me is often this emotional container. When we talk about something and we say, oh, it really upset me, or it bothers me, then usually there is some kind of emotion attached to what me experiences. And that's a really cool thing to get cognizant about, because me receives things and is this container of your emotions. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the roles that these different things play also, but let's continue on to the last part of what she said, which was after she said, and I don't feel like me when I'm frustrated and underperforming, but there's not a whole lot that seems to change that. This is where the part comes in. And this is one of the reasons why when it came up for me recently, as I was trying to change my language for public speaking and podcasting and all of these other things where I know I can continue to elevate the value I provide and the quality and professionalism of what I provide, I was like, oh, I'm really doing something detrimental here, not just to the ears of people who are listening who don't need all of these filler words, but also with my own beliefs. And ooh, that was enough for me to be like, oh, need to work on this now in a new and different way. So when you say you know instead of I know, because we could do that interchangeably, right? We could say, but I know there's not a whole lot that seems to change that. But that's not what she said. She said, but you know, there's not a whole lot that seems to change that. And if I'm a practitioner and my client is telling me that I know I can't do anything to change that, well, then what's the point of us working together? What's the point of going any further? If they're convinced that I know because they said you know about me, then there's no point. So it's really important, and something I've been bringing a lot of clarity to in my sessions and in my own life, because I think it's really important. Because the word means you, and if you're watching the video, you can see I'm pointing outside of myself. It doesn't mean me. And it also projects beliefs or values. And so you can really learn a lot there. I can really learn that my client believes that this is unchangeable. And that's huge and an awesome opportunity too. And chances are when people are coming from that position of this is my belief, even if they're not realizing that they're coming from that position, if I were to then say to my client in that moment something about how I do think it's totally changeable, I'd likely get an argument because it's a belief-based statement, even if they don't realize it. So this is an area where I've really started to pattern interrupt for myself and for my clients so that when they say those things, we can get clear in an instant about what they're projecting and what they actually mean. I will call them out on putting their beliefs on me and those not actually being my beliefs, and then require them to take responsibility for their beliefs instead of projecting it outward onto me. And like I said, at the same time, I'm taking responsibility for all the you knows that I've been putting out there that just seem and feel like casual conversation, but they are shifting things that I could otherwise be owning. And emotional freedom, guys, that's so much of what we're talking about here. And creating lives without overwhelm and anxiety that have greater calm, clarity, and confidence. And we have to take responsibility in order to get to that place. So this is a huge opportunity to do that for all of us out there doing the you know thing. You know? So in my own life, I try to do this for myself and catch myself. And when I'm working with people, I make it a point to respond when they use the word you as if they're talking to me and not just talking about themselves in a different way. And it's interesting because people are not used to that. We are not calling this out as much as we could be. And when we start calling it out, things can change so quickly, and the right stuff comes to the surface that needs to be met with love, acceptance, and forgiveness. We get to work on it and it gets to be resolved instead of us continuing to push it out there and hold these beliefs that don't serve us. But it's so interesting because we put so much of the focus on the self that we think needs all of this changing, all of this upgrading. And so often, the self isn't really what needs all the work. It's these other parts of us. And I have had a few people who have argued when I have dissected these different elements of the way that they present an issue because they believe that, oh, it's just a figure of speech, or the meaning's not that deep. It doesn't really mean what you're saying it means. But I have to argue that point because why are we saying anything at all if there's no meaning to it? Like, what's the point if there's no meaning in what is being said? And we can start getting a little uncomfortable, and that's a good thing. It takes getting uncomfortable to produce the change that we want in our lives, and that's just a fact. But if you'll entertain the concept that these different ways that we talk about ourselves matter, and that there's a lot we can learn from it, and a lot we can incorporate into our own healing, you can go really far with this. And it can be really helpful to take a little time and think about I, me, self, and you. Think about those things and think about, you can get a little abstract here. You can, if you think about you can ask yourself how old I is, what happens around I, and where about that is. It could be in your body, in your life. Where is I? And think about that also with me. When you think about me, where is that? And how old is your me? And think about these things in relation to the exact statements where you're using them, not just in general. But if you were to say something and use those things, then think about the statement you said and then ask yourself those questions. Where is me? What happens around me? And you can do the same thing for self. And it may feel a little bit strange. I know the first time that I did this exercise at a training, it felt really weird. And it was also uncanny in the midst of other people to see the way that for most people, I, me, self, and you, they represented them the same. You is like pointing out outside of yourself, pointing to whoever else it is, the you. And self was considered more of like a whole, and I was more up in the head, and me was more like a chest or stomach kind of representation when people would show where those parts were. It's really interesting. It's a whole other way of looking at parts work too. So I just wanted to share that with you today because it's something that I think is overlooked. And I think it's a gold mine for using alongside subconscious and nervous system work, and a huge upgrade for the way that you speak and what you take responsibility for in all of the areas of your life that matter to you. So I hope that was helpful. And if you're somebody who is looking to go deeper into the Becoming More Me journey, then I want to invite you to hop on a brief 15-minute call with me where we can explore and I will provide for you some very helpful insights on a few areas of your life where you could focus and be making huge changes right now. And you can do that by going to gamechangingconversation.com and picking a date and time that work for you. And I will totally look forward to going deep with you on that call and providing some insights and breakthroughs that are really going to make a difference in your life. So thank you all for listening today. I know you have, more choices than I can compute as far as podcasts you could be listening to. And I'm so very grateful and appreciative every time you choose to press play on an episode of Becoming More Me. Thanks for being with me here today. Thanks for spending some of your precious time with me today. If you loved this episode, please leave a review or simply share it with someone else who would get great benefit from it too. If you share on social media, please tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. And if your inner critic is still trying to argue with those facts, hit me up. We've got work to do.